I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Jillian Kinzie is Associate Director of the Center for Post-Secondary Research and the National Survey of Student Engagement Institute, known as NSSE, at the Indiana University School of Education. She conducts research and leads project activities on effective use of student engagement data to improve educational quality and directs a range of learning outcomes projects. She's co-author of a number of books and is co-editor of New Directions in Higher Education. In addition, she's on the editorial board of the Journal of College Student Development and the Journal of Learning Community Research, and she serves on the boards of Washington Internship Institute and the Gardner Institute for Excellence in Undergraduate Education. She's consulted with hundreds of institutions and higher education member organizations to increase the use of assessment results to inform improvements in undergraduate education and to enhance conditions for student success. So please welcome Dr. Kinzie.
Thank you. Good morning. Hey, it's a great day to be a Cubs fan, isn't it? Where are my Cubs fans? Yay. So I'm from Indiana in Bloomington, and for those of you who know your geography and know your baseball teams, you know that we have no national league, we have no team, we have a wonderful minor league team, but we don't have a major league baseball team in Indiana. So most people are Cubs fans. I, however, am from Cleveland. So I have a little bit of a dilemma. Where are my Cleveland colleagues? Oh, yay. Oh, yay. So it's a tough day to be from Cleveland right now. So we need to come back tonight. I'm sorry, Cubs fans. I think no matter what, as someone who's concerned about outcomes, I do a lot of work in outcomes. For me, there are only good outcomes from this game. So let's leave it at that. So I hope someone will win tonight, I think, right? That's the good outcome. All right, well, thank you for being here. We have a lot of work to do in higher education, and I want to float some ideas by you and revisit some old territory and really get us thinking a little bit more about this important concept of student success. And the title of my talk today is Student Success in Colleges and Universities, Advancing Know What and Know How. So that's where I'm going to try and pitch my comments today, and I'm going to be actually presenting some new material. So you guys are going to get the first pass at some new stuff. And to be honest, I could really use your help thinking about this work. So I'm considering this a group of great minds for retention and student success, and I hope you'll demonstrate these great minds to me as I ask you a couple of questions along the way. And I'd also want to invite your participation beyond this session. So I'm going to do a follow-up session from 10 to 11, and then I also want to invite your comments afterwards. I know, like if you're anything like me, you need some time to kind of reflect on things. And an idea might occur to you tomorrow or next week or a month from now, and I would enjoy hearing from anyone who starts their email with, I saw you or I heard you at the National Symposium, and then lead off with your question or comment. So I'll start with that open invitation to comment at any point. But as I said, I think we have a lot of work to do in higher education, and frankly, students need your help, institutions need your help, the public needs your help, because right now there's, I think, waning public confidence about what a college and university degree actually delivers on, and I think we've got an increasing amount of skepticism about what's going on in higher education, and some pretty critical comments, including things like our graduation rate and success rates divides deepening. Are we seeing greater inequities in what's going on in colleges and universities and the outcomes that result? So I think there's some real concerns about inequities, about skepticism, about quality, and concern about value. So there's a lot to do, and I don't want to start off this talk with how depressing things are or sobering statistics, But a recent report from Public Agenda, for those of you who follow that organization, about 2 weeks ago came up with a new report about kind of public confidence and public impressions about higher education. And the statistics that they trotted out that stuck in my mind was 59% of kind of the people who they surveyed, the public, say colleges today are more like businesses and care mainly about the bottom line. That number continues to creep up in terms of the proportion of people who really have some concerns about the real value of a college education. This is kind of scary stuff for me to think about. And I also think we've been talking about it too. I think we're at a real turning point in terms of access and success. So we've done pretty well on the access front. We've made some pretty significant strides to increase diversity, to really get a wider range of students who might never have thought about college before, bringing adults back in. I think it's bringing veterans in. It's been, I think, a real boost in terms of access. But we also have to help these same students get to the graduation stage, and that's where I think we haven't made as much progress. The other dimension I want to add to this, though, is that I think we have a real quality concern that's starting to reemerge, is can we say for sure that all students are getting a high-quality educational experience? Are we sure that they're engaged and involved in the things that we know matter for 21st century workplace and what we need in society? So there's a lot, not to put all of the pressure on us right now, but I think we have some emerging themes in the student success and retention world, and I want to point a few of these out that at least are on my mind and what I'm reading about and hearing about and studying. And the themes for me are quality, so some range of concerns about the quality of learning and the higher education experience overall, persistent concerns about equity in ensuring equity in success rates, this broader concern about the quality, again, of student learning and success. So we're not just concerned about kind of educational experiences, but the learning that occurs as a result of those. And then, of course, the completion aspect is always going to be a part of this equation. So I think there are some pretty serious themes for us to think about, and it widens the scope of what we've had to worry about, I'm afraid. Completion is one matter, but worrying about educational quality and about learning, our students' learning, it just adds to all the things we have to really think about and address. So we've been pretty focused on graduation rates, I think. So we've been concerned about this, had this in mind. The whole idea that 55% of students who, are graduating from a 4-year nonprofit college, that's been a statistics that is out there. We know what the rates are in terms of community college participation and retention. We know that there are these serious concerns about the number and proportion of students who are graduating. So we've been monitoring this, right? We've been thinking about these graduation rates for some time. But I think 21st century metrics need more. We've probably dedicated a little too much attention to simple measures of college completion, and I think it could be distracting us from the important work that needs to be done to ensure quality. So that's a pretty, I don't know if that helps our situation any, but I think we really need to invest a little more fully in optimizing the college experience for all students. So this is where we are. I think we've got a lot of attention focused on graduation and retention, but it's necessary, but really insufficient in terms of what we need for higher education today. So I want to get you thinking about this. All right, so you're all fresh. You had an evening, I hope, a good evening, and got some good rest last night. So I want to at least get your impressions about some of this and to get some of your ideas out on the table. I'd like you to at least do a little first thinking on your own. I know we all need a little warm up here, so this is in the spirit of kind of think, pair, share work in good educational settings. First, do a little thinking on your own. What does student success mean at your institution, and how are you measuring it? So really quick, kind of, jot some notes if it helps you, if you need to write to learn or write to think. How do I know what I think until I write it down or until I say it, and we're kind of going to get there. So take a moment here. All right, and now, of course, some of you are already doing it, starting to talk to each other perhaps. So let's have you turn to your neighbor. Let's do the real think, pair, share. What's on your minds? For 1 minute, share it. One other person. All right. Let's hear a few ideas out here. What does student success mean at your institution? Perhaps you can nominate a person you talked to who offered a slightly different conception of student success than perhaps you had in mind. So volunteer your colleague or the person that you thought, paired, and shared with. Who's got an idea? This is the audience participation part of the talk. All right, I do know some of your names, so you don't want me to start calling on you. Yes, please, thank you. In the lovely blue, yes. And you have to use your best outdoor voice.
Good morning. I'm Morgan from New Jersey City University. I'm the assistant provost here. Our success for NJCU undergraduates includes develop expertise in a discipline, general education competencies, experiential learning achievements, global citizenship skills and orientation, timely graduation with minimal debt, and career placement for graduate studies.
Please tell me you didn't just write that while you were at the table.
No, it's been a university initiative spearheaded by our president and VPs, and we all got together and talked about our mission as far as student success, and we identified those particular areas, and that's on our website.
Nice.
And it's cascading down into all of the divisions and departments of units.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you for setting the bar very high for. Now, I'm sure, does anyone else like to volunteer anything now? This is really tough. Okay, thank you very much. So this is on your website, so we can actually look it up and see kind of the scope. Okay, thank you. Yes, in the back.
Good morning, I'm Josh Prescott at CLU. Our definition of success has come to include equity and affordability as well. So it's all the outcomes, kind of language we just heard right example, by the way, but also equity and affordability so our students experience those things in a way that is fair across income levels, skin colors, and LGBTQ status. It's a challenge for us.
So let me, you have a very excellent voice. I hope everybody heard that. You're from Seattle U, so you have a Jesuit mission too. So So I really get the expression of that mission through a concern about equity, which is great. And I appreciate very much the attention to affordability and that it's fair across particular student populations, particularly underrepresented students. Nice. Okay, great. All right, who else has got one? Those are pretty good. Yes?
Jeffrey Anderson from St. Leo University, and the Jesuits get to speak, so I'm Benedictine. And Villanova Augustinians. And one of the things that we came to realize very quickly is what we say student success means includes living out the Augustinian or the Benedictine values. And there's a lot of programming, a lot of activities that go on in terms of developing students. But when it comes time to measuring in our office institutional effectiveness, that takes the back seat, and we're going to get around to it one of these centuries.
Yeah.
So we just see a disconnect between what we say is important and the need to measure it.
Thank you for adding a dose of reality from the Benedictines here, and the Villanovans too. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting tension. Here we have some, I would think, real leaders in terms of addressing this equity concern, and even you're realizing how challenging this is when the real press comes into the situation. Okay, great, good. One more example? Yeah, Ed. Okay, I know Ed in the back. All right.
Ed Sullivan with California State University. Our world is now about shorter time of degree.
Yeah.
2-year graduates and transfer, 4-year graduates from freshman class. We're closing all gaps by ethnic, by income, by family education level. All of those things become important, but even more important are the degrees earned by our students actually align with jobs that are going to be available in California. And the bigger challenge there is, and it goes to the social justice piece, are the students earning the degrees in fields that are actually going to lead to that opportunity for life-changing moments.
Wow. Thank you, Ed. And thanks for adding the other kind of element of reality that I think has really crept in pretty strongly to this student success agenda, which is ensuring that students have workplace skills, that they're actually able to go in and be employed someplace. So that adds another dimension to this work. So I want to come back and offer now a definition that we've been playing around with. Thank you for offering some insights on this. And I think I want you to keep thinking about this, because I hope that in at least the conversation that you had perhaps at your table, or that you just heard a few snippets of, that you're really starting to realize just how expansive this scope of this work really is. And I think there was a time when, I don't remember really all that well, when there was only a time to focus on just first-year retention as a student success indicator and as just kind of thinking about graduation. But I think it's gotten increasingly complex. And I don't think we can ignore all of these aspects given all of the concerns about higher education. So I want to offer a definition that we've been playing around with a little bit to broaden our sense of what student success is about. And I think it reflects a lot of the things that we were just talking about. So the definition that we're kind of putting out there to see if we can push on a little bit more is that student success is increased numbers of diverse student groups participating in high-quality educational experiences and earning high-quality credentials. So it doesn't speak specifically to, graduate and go on to a workplace, but I think that's reflected in the earning of high-quality credentials that mean something, that it reflects a wider range of credentials, certificates, degrees, community college associate degrees, and that we're valuing a variety of forms of credentials in higher education. So it's not all wrapped up in a 4-year degree. It's not all about ensuring just those graduation rates, but it's more complex than that. I think probably the learning dimension is a little underplayed in this definition, and I think I want to continue to work on getting the learning outcomes in this role, but as I said, we're trying to play with some definitions. So this is one of the key pieces, I think, of work moving forward, is getting a sharper and a broader definition of what student success is about. And I really appreciate New Jersey City, kind of having your definition really posted and available for people to look at. And I think that's something that, I know a lot of schools have, and I've been trolling websites looking for different expressions of student success. But I like the fact that we're getting more explicit and we're being bolder about what we're after. So I want to keep encouraging that. But before we do more encouraging and being bolder, I do want to revisit some territory, as I said, and I want to test out a little bit about what we know about retention and student success. And I'm going to go through some slides pretty quickly here, because I know I'm speaking to a pretty educated and informed audience. But I don't want to leave things out, and I want to see, and then we're going to do another pause for reflection where I ask you to think about these theories and models and strategies with me and see if we've got it all, or if we're missing some things. So I want to do a couple of things to think about what we know about student retention and success. And I want to offer some theoretical guides, just a quick review of some of that. I want to talk a little bit about some empirically attested approaches, and then some, what I think is really important to this work, time-honored practitioner wisdom about how to do student retention and success work. So let me begin with kind of the tree of theoretical knowledge about student success. And this work, I think all of you are pretty familiar with, and I'm sure when Lori Schreiner talked yesterday, she really hit on some of these aspects of the theories about student retention and success as well. But I want to just mention, the importance of anchoring all of our work in these perspectives. So the perspectives are pretty strong. We need to be concerned about the organizational aspects. So if I look at the kind of what is your right side of the tree, the organizational development aspects, thinking about our institutional structures and processes, and students' perceptions of those processes for student success, that's a dimension that we know a lot about. We also know a lot about the economic theories that are supporting student success and student retention, including all of the financial aid analyses and the cost-benefit perspectives that we have on student success and retention. Then we move over to the sociological dimensions, and this one's probably the strongest theoretical base for concerns about retention. This is where Vince Tinto's work resides. Anybody who's done research on student and institutional fit, this is where, from the sociological perspective, anyone that's looked at distinguishing groups of students who leave, all of that work is informed by the sociological perspective. And then Lori, yesterday, probably really talked a lot about the psychological perspective that thriving is really based in. So really understanding a lot more about individual attributes and student motivation and self-efficacy. This is well-trod ground. I think we know a lot about these underlying theories of success. But I think there have been some more emerging theories and models for student success that really emphasize a little bit more about, that are learning-centered, that emphasize learning in the classroom. We also have some that emphasize the importance of talent development. This has been where my own work kind of sits, is what does it mean to be an engaging institution where students thrive and are retained and are successful at high rates? And then a whole batch of new theories and ideas around sense of belonging, growth mindset, student engagement, where I think I'm contractually obligated to mention student engagement as many times as I can in every talk that I give, but student engagement being a big dimension of student success and retention. And then this newer area that I think is really an important element here, this idea of inclusive excellence and equity. So these are a little bit more of the emerging theory, some old, a little bit, some new, some refinements on some old ideas. So I want to touch on a few of these a little bit more. And the first one I want to start with is the learning-centered ideas about retention and success. And this is a Vince Tinto phrase, student success in the classroom. That's what we're talking about. That's where we need to see retention. That's where we need to be concerned about student success rates, is in the classroom. And it's about focusing on engaging pedagogies, about challenge and support in the classroom setting, and ensuring that students get feedback, and ensuring that there's a sense of community and collaboration among students and faculty. So these aspects of learning, have been, again, I think, well expressed by Vince Tinto and other folks who have really been emphasizing the importance of classroom. In fact, Vince had has been doing a series of I think I guess they are opinion pieces. They're opinion pieces in Inside Higher Ed, and he had another one in August kind of reminding us again of these same ideas. And I think it's a really important thing for us to remind ourselves about is this is where it's happening. This is where we're really going to see a difference on retention and success is by focusing on the classroom. So I think that's one. The other thing that we're seeing a lot around this learning-centered approach for retention and success is on gateway course redesign. So if any of you doing gateway course redesign on your campus, kind of course redesign, any large lecture, this is a really important dimension of that learning-centered framework for student success. And I'm going to quote from anyone here. I know we had some UNC Chapel Hill folks. Where are my Chapel Hill friends? This is where if you're not here, you're going to get exposed. Yay, okay, back table, yay. So thank you. Glad you're here. So I have been following some work on redesign that's been happening, and Kelly Hogan is a faculty member, a biology professor actually, at UNC Chapel Hill, and she has been revising her course, and I've been looking at it from a distance. Again, I spend a lot of time reading things and thinking about and following what people are doing on campuses. And I was really impressed with the work that she's been doing. And what she reports is that when she saw this sobering statistic in her biology class, that 70% of the African American students and 40% of the Latino students were failing, and first-generation students were struggling too. When she got that level of data broken down about the students who were in her large intro biology class, and she had this for multiple years, she said, this isn't right. I need all students to be successful in this course. I can't have this many. So it was a very sobering statistic for her, and she said when she saw that, she just had to change the way she taught. She knew that this was her imperative. She knew she needed to do something different. And she said, okay, nothing I'm doing here is in line with how learning works. That's the problem. The way this course is being taught is not in line with what we know about learning. So she went back and made some pretty serious revisions. She revised a whole series of instructional practices. She revised assignments so that they were more thoughtful and were ways to engage students with ideas in different ways. She introduced new material through assignments, and then had each time she starts a class with a question that's based on this either short or large assignment about new content. She did a lot of what we did earlier, think, pair, share, to get people stimulated and thinking about, to get the students really into the ideas right from the start. She did a lot of e-polling to test understanding along the way, so that important element of feedback. And then she did a lot of quizzes, challenges, and games to not only keep students engaged, but also to give them occasions to test their own knowledge, to get help when they needed it sooner than they were getting it when it was solely based on a midterm exam. So she did a lot in her Gateway course redesign efforts, and things are changed. The statistics for who is successful in her course have evened out considerably. So I think there's a lot going on, and she's just an example of what I'm seeing many faculty now doing in their courses. So I think this is an important dimension, and we now know quite a bit about what it takes to design effective classroom experiences for students. All right, so that's one, the learning center perspective. The other idea that's been around for some time now, certainly something that Alexander Aston and colleagues brought out in the 80s. It's a really kind of an old concept, but this idea of a talent development perspective. And Art Chickering, one of my favorite people, really has written a lot more about how important it is to believe that every student can learn under the right conditions. This is particularly important for his students who have been underserved in higher education. That belief that the students have the capacity by educators and other people around and who are interacting with them in an institution is essential. We need to get rid of notions that somehow underpreparedness is their defect. and instead really believe that all students come to college capable, able to do the work, but they're going to need some assistance. They're going to need our support to do this work. How in the world could we expect them to really know everything that they need to do in order to be successful? We need to spell it out for them. We need to hold them accountable, too, for what we spell out, but we need to help them along the way. So this is an important perspective. So I think this is a strong element of student success dimensions. The other one I want to mention is the engaging institutions perspective, and this work was well demonstrated, I think, in the Student Success in College book that I was part of, the project that not only collected data for this, but that pulled it all together in this book that has been revised. And as far as I can tell, the principles and ideas from the last version of this in 2010 when we updated it still hold. Now, I think there's a heck of a lot more. I'm afraid the book would be a lot longer right now if we were to repeat this, because there's a lot more that I think I would add about learning and this learning center perspective that needs to be demonstrated. But I think the principles in this, in terms of what we know about high-performing institutions, colleges and universities that graduate higher proportions of students and have students who are engaged at higher levels, is pretty, holds true still. And for those of you who can't recite the principles by chapter and verse, I'll give them to you. So if you don't remember what those principles are, there are conditions that we identified as being really important for promoting student success, and we actually heard a little bit of some of the expression of the first one in several of our comments from the Benedictines and the Jesuits about how important it is to have a mission that really speaks to student success dimensions and that is explicit about what it is that you want for your students. That's an important thing, and to get people at the university and to get students to commit to that really makes a student success agenda come alive. The second dimension is unshakable focus on student learning, that everybody's committed to student learning. This is probably the chapter or chapters that I would think has to really expand in any sort of update to the Student Success in College book. The third dimension is that we're actually considering and thoughtful about how we're adapting environments for educational advantage. So urban institutions are taking advantage of being in a community, a wider community, taking advantage of what they can do in terms of internships and allowing students to do job shadowing and really taking advantage of that. And rural institutions are taking advantage of their space to do a lot more experiential kind of work. So those are just some simple ideas about how important it is to think about the environment and how you're adapting and advantaging that for educational enrichment. The fourth principle is about clearly marked pathways. This is probably the second dimension of the themes in this book that would need much wider expansion. I think we've gotten a lot better with the importance of clear pathways to student success. The fifth is one that I know anybody in the room who's in institutional research and all my IR colleagues understand is critically important, is that we need data and information in order to make change, and we need to do this in a wider spirit of an improvement-oriented ethos. The quality improvement dimension, I think, has only gotten stronger, due in some part to some accreditation press for quality improvement, but I think this dimension remains important. And then the last one is this shared responsibility for educational quality. And this is probably the aspect that's still important, but we probably haven't made as much progress around this dimension. So these are the conditions that we identified and that I think are still true in terms of engaging institutions. So, if you're thinking about, okay, how do we do on some of these dimensions, this might be a time to take stock and do a little inventory. Can we say we're doing pretty well around these dimensions? Where do we fall short? That might be worth doing. All right, so that's the engaging institutions. And now I want to just mention or remind us about some of the things we've learned from NSSE and other student engagement kinds of projects. And there's no denying, and we keep demonstrating this kind of year after year, about the importance of engaged learning for all the outcomes that we're after. So if we're after retention and graduation and completion and high quality learning, we need to focus on how students are engaged. What are they doing? How are they engaged in the educationally purposeful activities that we know matter for their learning? So my simple suggestion on this one in terms of what we know is simply reminding you about the engagement indicators. For those of you who haven't been following transitions in NSSE, and SESI's actually making their own changes, revising and updating their survey. They're in the process of doing that too for my community college friends in the audience. Is focusing on engagement indicators. So in 2013, we introduced new engagement indicators, which are actually, there are 10 now. We used to have 5 benchmarks. Now we have 10 indicators. And if we were just to focus on these 10 indicators, I mean, that seems like, I don't even know how I can put the word just focus on 10 things, but focus on these 10 indicators, and that will make a difference in terms of what we're doing. And some of them are things that, you know, we're already focused on. Quality of student-faculty interaction, things like ensuring effective teaching practices are going on, encouraging and providing opportunities for students to reflect on their learning and to integrate learning across ideas or to apply their learning. Those are all things that are worth focusing on to increase student retention, student engagement, and success. So I think there are a lot of clues in what we've learned from NSSE and SESI and other student engagement kinds of projects over, you know, really the last 2 decades almost now. I want to share with you some, actually this is coming out, it isn't even available yet. We'll have it in mid-November. We're going to share some recent data that recent analyses that we conducted to study the relationship between engagement scores and institutional retention and graduation rates. So we actually merged institutional results from NSSE with retention and graduation results from the scorecard. So we had about 1,000 schools in this analysis, and what we did was, I know it's probably hard to see this little graph, but if you just look at the black line as the anchor, which is the 0 correlation point, and then look at everything that's okay, now I gotta get my right and left to the right of that, you're going to see what dimensions those engagement indicators I just mentioned are correlated with. The red little circle is retention, and the little hats, the little mortarboards, are graduation. And what we did was we identified the correlates, and these are actually the strengths of the association here. The correlations are indicated on this graph. So we did this, and we're actually, you know, it was reinforcing to see that pretty much, except for a couple of things which had some funny negative relationships. We can talk later about student-faculty interaction and how sometimes that lands on the negative correlation side. We can talk about what that means, and I'd love to hear your comments about that afterwards. But everything else first landed on the positive side, so these, you know, it reinforces this idea that these are worth investing in. But some of the things actually had some pretty strong correlations. The first one is collaborative learning, which is at the top of this chart. I actually cut this down a little bit because it was too much to look at all at once. But the collaborative learning dimension is actually one of the strongest correlations. That is at 0.4 correlation for collaborative learning for both outcomes. So that aspect of ensuring that collaborative learning is going on and your students are experiencing it in and outside the classroom is a really important dimension for retention and graduation. Some of the other strongest correlations were in discussions with diverse others, higher order learning skills, and reflective and integrative learning. So those kinds of practices are worth investing in. We need to keep thinking about them. The one, though, that surprised me was we decided that it was important to include 2 measures about time spent studying in this analysis. And hours per week studying came out as the strongest correlation with both retention and graduation. It actually was 0.55 for retention and 0.65 for graduation. It was stronger than any other measure. Can I just let that sit for a second? Stronger than any other measure. We also ask about students' perceptions of the institutional emphasis on studying. You can see that's right above the hours per week studying, and that actually came out strong too. So, you know, these dimensions and what they account for. This accounts for about 30% of the variance in retention, 42% in graduation rates. This matters. So for me, you know, if we think about the amount of time students spend studying, the emphasis, the institutional emphasis, kind of this broad perception of the culture on a campus are important. So how do we promote a culture with high expectations for studying and where first-year students are actually practicing positive study habits? So this is one thing, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. How do we do this? How do we get more students to actually practice these positive study habits, because they make a difference? So to me, this is and it reinforces that adage, that message that's been a part of orientation that we've kind of drone on about for a long time. But wow, this is where it's at. This is important. So that's kind of new on the engagement front. Those are some new things that we're seeing around that. Some of the other things that I just want to mention from the engagement front that you've probably maybe been monitoring or maybe have heard a little bit about is the high-impact practices work. This has also been part of the NSSE agenda since 2007, and really I would say that it's not even our agenda anymore. It's really the Association of American Colleges and Universities, AAC&U's agenda, and some states that have taken on this agenda. How many of you are thinking about high-impact practices and are working on? Okay, so we have maybe a quarter in the room. So these are high-impact practices, and I'll show you what they are in a second for those of you who aren't as familiar. CSRDE, again, community colleges have identified the same kinds of practices. Many of them overlap considerably, at least to the extent that they exist within community college experiences. The study abroad is one that doesn't quite flow as well, but we're seeing more international experiences in community college as well, so I don't think we're far behind in terms of experiences. But high-impact practices have been identified, and we've seen, we identified them first by studying 6 practices, and then AAC&U has really expanded on that and has really delved into the research to identify these practices that make a significant difference to retention and graduation rates and really are transformative in what they offer students. So these are all the practices, and I actually understand there's going to be a new one added to the AAC&U's list. This is 10 items, and they're going to add Eportfolios. Do many of you have, I know we have do we have some CUNY schools in the room? Eportfolios, okay, Seattle has Eportfolio, okay, excellent. So Eportfolios are going to be the next high-impact practice because they convey a lot of the same benefits to students in terms of the intensity with which students are actually reflecting on and working through what they're learning, and that they have some goal and some way to demonstrate what they've been learning, so it really focuses them on the goal. So we're seeing Eportfolios as another high-impact practice, as transformative in what they provide students. So there's been a lot of work around high-impact practices for retention and success, and I think it's worth investing in. For any of us who had one of these transformational experiences, if any of you were doing undergraduate research or had a capstone or a senior project kind of experience or got to study abroad, you know the transformative power that this has for a student and their education. It has particularly important benefits for retention and graduation. So these are important practices. The Cal State system has been kind of a leader in this regard. Cal State, many institutions, actually these results come from Cal State Northridge. Their institutional research office has been studying the impact of students' participation in high impact practices for a number of years now, and they have actually demonstrated not only the benefits to underserved students. When underserved students do more high impact practices, it actually makes up for some gaps in graduation rates. So in this case, I know you probably can't see this bar chart, maybe you can. The important part to look at on here are what happens to Latino students once they've had 2 or 3 high-impact practices. We see graduation rates that are pretty significantly lagging with 0 at the bottom in the 0 graph. But in comparison to non-Latino, that's the large comparison group, 38% Latino graduation rate for 0 high-impact practices and 55% for non-Latino. But then if you add the students who have high-impact practices to that, they actually make up and actually end up eclipsing non-Latino students in terms of graduation rates by their participation. So they're associating high-impact practice participation with graduation rate, and some of their analyses actually show that some of this work does not increase time to degree. It actually has shortened some time to degree for some of their students because they get so intensely involved. And I think the thought or the hypothesis is that it compels them to finish. So that's kind of an interesting idea. So this has been a very popular idea. Lots of places have been looking at high-impact practices and what they afford students. So I know there are lots of you who probably are employing other strategies, and I'm going to mention a few of them that are currently popular. So in some ways, these are probably like the most popular things going on right now that I've seen. One is Complete College America. How many of you are in Complete College America states where you're focusing on the principle? Okay, so these are their game changers and in terms of what needs to be addressed. That's a popular dimension. The other one are people working on structured pathways. This work has really gotten a lot of attention, and I think it's meritorious in terms of what it affords students, and the clarity and the work that we're seeing to develop greater, more explicit pathways for students is really important. The student success in college work continues to be used as a thought piece at lots of campuses. And then AAC and U's work, I just want to commend around inclusive excellence. They have continued to push us to think more about ensuring equity for all student populations, and equity even more broadly than that. How are we assuring that all students are exposed to diverse ideas? So they're raising some important questions around those student success strategies. And then, of course, I can't forget or neglect any of the many vendor products that I saw in the exhibit hall today. So I want to commend and congratulate all the exhibitors for doing some pretty amazing work. I know that the data and metrics stuff is really important to colleges and universities, and I'm amazed at where we are and how much the field has grown in terms of predictive analytics, learning analytics, and what we're able to do. So, credit to all of the brains and the nerds that are working on all that. I know it's impressive, and it's been really important to the work that's gone on. And even the U.S. Department of Ed has gotten in this student success game a little bit more by offering some What Works clearinghouse. I'm not so sure it's all that terrific, but it's out there, and okay, this is being recorded. I should be careful what I say when I mention the U.S. Department of Education. But they are offering some strategies on the site. But there's a lot going on, and I think almost a dizzying amount of things that are going on these days. So there's no shortage, really, of strategies and ideas for this work. So I want to hit on a couple more, again, reviewing a couple of newer ideas that are emerging. And some of these feel like old ideas to me, so I want to test them out on you. Okay, the first one that I'm hearing a lot more about is about this notion of belongingness. Really old concept of belongingness, but this notion that if we really want to understand student success and retention, we need to dig a little deeper into what's in students' heads and what's running through their minds when they're on our campuses. So these are some concerns about students really questioning their sense of, do they have what it takes? Do I really belong here? This is particularly true for students who are historically underserved and they're at competitive, more selective institutions. It can really, we understand, erode students' sense of self-confidence and really make them not reach out when they need to reach out for help. So there's some real concern about this attention to belongingness. But correspondingly, there have been some great work around what it takes to address this issue, and the importance of the students really building connections with other people. And Terrell Strayhorn, for those of you who know Terrell, who's at Ohio State now, has been publishing and writing about the importance of cultural navigators and how do we help more people on campus become cultural navigators. These educators, adults on campus, even peer mentors, more advanced peers who are really helping students figure out how to be successful at education and life simultaneously. So these people are part of this is the theory behind some of the coaching initiatives that have been a part of our work. But the person who serves as a cultural navigator is a translator, helps the student figure out, okay, that's normal. This happens to a lot of people, so let's not over magnify what's going on in your life right now. Let's help you through that. They're a coach, and they're also a guide. They give students important feedback, like how much should you be studying? Are you studying in the right way? That kind of real kind of instructive cultural navigation is really important. So this is a way to address belonging. The other thing that we're seeing a lot more of is growth mindset for student success, and I don't know if any of you have kind of tapped into this work and this literature, but this is growing in popularity. The idea that Carol Dweck, David Yeager, Angela Duckworth, and her colleagues have studied this idea of whether students have a fixed view of their own intelligence, and that it doesn't matter how hard I try, it's really just about being smart. Either you're smart or you aren't. And if you're not a naturally smart, there's no point in trying, is a fixed mindset. And instead, we want to think a little bit more about the malleability of intelligence and helping students develop a growth mindset where trying harder is what makes you smarter. It's not just about having smarts. This notion that's even more important is that obstacles can be expected, but they can be overcome through effort and taking advantage of resources on campus. That's the important part of this dimension. It's not just trying hard, it's about taking advantage of resources on campus. So this growth mindset idea is getting a lot more attention in student success and retention work. We saw this probably most dramatically demonstrated at the University of Texas at Austin, where they had, and David Yeager, who's has been really pushing on this work. If you read his stuff, it's pretty amazing. But UT employed an intervention where they had students, their incoming students, read messages about working hard, using resources, and they interspersed some really good language from real students at UT Austin about how they overcame these struggles. And they asked students kind of what you thought about these experiences, and they asked students then who were writing these experiences, so the students that were successful, talked about, kind of normalized that struggle as a part of being at this institution, that it does require work, and that's part of being a student at this institution. So they had this pretty minimal intervention that students did. It was a computer-based intervention. And they studied what happened to the students that received that intervention afterwards, and they saw some immediate effects. So even this short, I think it was probably like a 30-minute exercise, they discovered that these students were more likely to complete a full load of courses. The effect was stronger among this at-risk population that they identified, and that students were more likely to report their use of services and feeling supported at the institution. So one of the things they had to address is, oh my gosh, we've got this new demand for services. How do we address this? So I guess that's not a bad challenge to have, but that was something that the institution had to address then. So that's a really interesting dimension, is how this small intervention actually prompted students to act in the way that we know will benefit them for retention and success. We've been playing around with NSSE and a growth mindset. We added a couple of experimental questions this year, and we'll be rolling out some results from some of that. It was amazing to me, the proportion of students who, we asked a series of questions, and I'm illustrating one of the growth mindset questions that asks, my intelligence is mainly the result of life experiences that challenged me and made me work hard. 59% of the students that responded to NSSE, this was a sample of about 12,000 students, agreed with that statement, or they agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. 59% did. The rest would kind of start to move into that fixed mindset realm, those that kind of didn't have that proportion. But we have a pretty good proportion that have a growth mindset going in. And we wanted to relate this a little bit to engagement practices. So some of those same things I mentioned earlier. And it turns out that students with a growth mindset were most likely to use effective learning strategies, the one that you would kind of expect, that students recognize that, yeah, I need to summarize my notes, I need to read, I need to review after class, I need to take advantage of learning support services. So students with a growth mindset were more likely to do those things. And they were also more likely to engage in reflection on their learning. They were more likely to say, yes, I've had experiences that changed my views. I learned something different. Those kinds of growth kinds of attributes were reflected. So I think there's something to this mindset stuff. Is that a fair statement or I don't know, that doesn't sound like very researchy kind of conclusion language. I think there's something to this stuff. So I think the interventions, we're starting to see there's a relationship there. We need to pay attention to this. The last piece I want to hit on or mention to you is the popularity of what do we do about some of this stuff we eventually learn about what behaviors are important. And I want to mention the work that some campuses have been engaging in to develop nudges around academic behaviors. This work is popular in terms of identifying and reminding students about things they need to be aware of, deadlines, all sorts of really kind of tasky things that can get students horribly off track if they miss them. And frankly, it's not worth it. Just give them the darn reminders or do it. It's just silly that we're letting students get sidetracked by such silly things. So this nudge idea is increasingly popular, and I think it underlies a lot of that academic coach work again. So if you haven't seen some of this, it's a fun exercise to get your staff and people thinking about how do we increase messaging to students so that they understand what they should be focused on right now. And I think predictive and learning analytics are really helping us do some of this work well too. Okay, so that's my big range of kind of what we know. And my conclusion is that we know a lot about what increases student success, right? Doesn't it seem like we know a lot? I mean, didn't that seem a little overwhelming you were supposed to feel overwhelmed. Do people feel overwhelmed with options, strategies, how to do this work? Okay, that was what you were supposed to be and these are, kind of the summary again of all the things that I just kind of went through. So there's a lot out there, so I feel like, how do we pick and choose? How do we decide what we're going to focus on? What do we want to do? Lots of shiny objects around. I know on my campus we get real distracted with shiny objects, and that's a real, it's a pitfall to this work. So what are you thinking? Here's our pause for reflection again. Do you agree that we know a lot? What's getting in the way of making greater progress? We know all this stuff. Why haven't we seen greater improvements? Who's got an idea? Toss out an idea. What's getting in the way? Give me a good idea. Yeah. No campus-wide buy-in on some of these ideas. What else? Resources and money. Okay, is that Phyllis? Okay, geez. I didn't even look over there. I knew your voice. All right. Yes, you're right. Resources and money. Okay, what else? What was that? Oh my gosh, stuck in committees like bills and laws, right? Okay. Yes, stuck in committees. So we're talking about something over and over again. When are we going to get off the ground with this idea? That kind of, okay. All right. Anybody else? Yeah. Failure to align reward structures. That's a very nice statement. Yes. Very important point. So she's saying that we have failed to align or realign reward structures. We want faculty to do these engaging pedagogies. We want them to take risks and engage students. We want them to be, willing to kind of take students and involve them in experiential learning. But we're not rewarding them for doing those things. We haven't realigned in that way. Great. Yeah. What else?
Just staying federal focus on the completion agenda instead of total.
Yeah, so again, this kind of what I started out with, this very narrow focus on completion agenda. It makes it really hard to pay attention to these other things, or those other things can drop off unless you can really demonstrate that they are connected. I think we can demonstrate that they're connected, but it's hard to make that argument to people who are so focused on the number at the end. Okay, all right, so you're kind of where I am with all this stuff. All right, well, let me propose what I think some of the challenges are. We've got all this knowledge, but we've got uneven application across institutions and among students. So some students get these great redesign classes, but not everybody. Some students get high impact practices, but not everybody. Some students get a coach, but not everybody. So we've got this uneven application across institutions and students. This was one that really strikes me as we have a lack of integration across efforts. We've got a smattering, the smorgasbord, kind of a bunch of things that are going on, but they're not integrated under any umbrella or in any sort of cohesive whole. So it leads to people not being bought into things because they're not really sure what's going on. They know their little corner of the universe, but they don't really know what it adds up to. They don't know how it's connected. I think we've also seen at the same time an expansion of discrete, disconnected programs. So we've gone kind of off the rails with, okay, now we're going to do this little program over here, and then we're going to do this little program over here. So we've kind of let lots of that grow and bloom. And I think we also have a challenge that oftentimes, because of the sense of urgency, I think, we leap to implement before we really fully develop a clear sense of the problem or the unique aspects of the context. So we see an idea from this institution over here, and we want to implement it, but we fail to take into account that these are really different contexts, and our students aren't, that's not the same. So I think we've got some real challenges moving forward. So I think that to make greater strides to improve student success, we need to think a little bit more about, or re-examine, let's say, some of our assumptions about improving student success. We've got a lot of stakeholders out there. I think there's a lot of opinion, a lot of beliefs about what's important. But more importantly, I think we need to think about our theory about how to achieve the goal. Okay, so I want to get us to this, and I took a little bit too much time with some of the earlier parts, so I'm going to speed through. So I'm going to ask you all to look down at your table or look at your neighbor while I go through a couple slides that I don't want to go to. I don't feel the need to, so look away. Okay, this lovely one, okay. Yeah, okay, look away for a moment. Okay, all right, so I want to get to this know-how. This is the second part of the talk, okay, so this is we've covered the know-what. Now I want to get to the know-how. So here's my idea. Today's agenda for student success needs a better representation of the how of student success. We need a conceptual structure that offers a more comprehensive representation of the key structural components for student success, emphasizing how student success will be achieved. I think this is where the work is underdeveloped. I was asked, I was working on a grant project, and this is some Lumina Foundation for Education that's in Indiana, one of our main foundations, a significant foundation in Indiana and now across the country, is been trying to mobilize mobilize higher education for student success. So we've been doing some thinking about this. And it really has come down to kind of developing some larger conceptual structure. How are we going to increase graduation and completion and success rates? How are we going to get high quality equity experiences? And we turn to the improvement sciences literature to really think a little bit more about how to do this work. So improvement sciences literature has some theories of action and some really interesting models for how you get to a goal. So if the goal is student success, what are some of the things that you need to do to get there? So there's a strategy that's been tested in lots of different kinds of settings, less so in higher education, but more so in actually K-12 education, called a driver diagram. It's really a tool for building and testing theories for improvement. So this is kind of the idea that there's an aim, and then you have primary drivers, and then you have secondary drivers that contribute to those things, and then you have a lot of change strategies that underlie it. And this isn't, I just want to acknowledge the driver diagram we're trying to work through for this work. But it's the idea of how do we build on everything we know? How do we take advantage of everything we know and really build on the knowledge from research, observation, and experience? So let's play around with this idea. So the big goal is to increase student success. So if that's our goal, that's our aim, that's what we're shooting for, what we're trying to get to. And the work that I've been doing and that my colleagues and I have been working on is to try and identify what are the drivers for this big goal? What are some of the big things that will help us know more about the know-how of student success? So here are the 5 drivers. Okay, I'm going to go through these a little bit more, but just so you can see the 5 drivers that I'm going to talk about a little bit, and this is what I really would like to get your reaction to. So the 5 drivers are contributing. They're the big kind of representation of what we need to do to increase student success. And let me go through them one by one so you can kind of get a sense that there are 5, so count along here. So the first driver, and they're not in any sort of order, so they're just kind of the drivers, the 5 drivers. The first kind of thing we need to get better at is to really change and improve the idea of increased student success, is we need to develop a more comprehensive, integrated approach to student success. And I think this is the know-how aspect. This is to address this kind of fragmented, discrete, lots of different programs out there. This integrated approach requires the identification and elimination of scattershot, isolated, or boutique programs for student success. And it means bringing together stakeholders and efforts to make sure that we're collaborating, and where necessary, we develop special programs. So this requires some thinking about how much do we really know, and can we bring together the programs that we think are supporting student success. And this is the hard part, identifying perhaps what is so boutique, it's really not contributing much. This is the hard part. This is where everybody says, uh-oh. Okay, so this is the first one, the development of a comprehensive integrated approach to student success. But first you gotta start with that comprehensive integrated approach. Okay, the second driver to get us to increase student success is the implementation of more literature-informed, empirically based approaches to student enrollment, transition, persistence, student learning, and success. And the commensurate assessment of outcomes to assure quality and effectiveness. So this is the assessment agenda and the institutional research agenda that we need to keep pushing on, not only drawing from the literature about what works, but ensuring that what we're doing is working. Okay, so one more know-how. All right, so the third know-how, or the third aspect, is the enactment of a cultural system of student success. So this is going to broaden our scope. So the idea here is that we need to increase our connections between post-secondary institutions and P16 partners and units and stakeholders, trustees, governing boards, state legislators across the institution. So this is acknowledging that this work is not going to get done until we really engage all of these communities. So this cultural system of student success addresses the breadth of the work that needs to be done. The fourth driver taps on something that I think we've actually made significant progress around and can start to put a lot of strategies that are currently being employed in both the community college and four-year sector, is the application of clear pathways for student learning and success that guide students to completion, and that are monitored with real-time data. So this is where I think all of the advances we've made around learning analytics, predictive analytics can really help us out. This one probably, to me, is where most of that work would go in terms of a change strategy. And as a real activity that's associated with this primary driver. This application of clear pathways is informed by monitoring and really thinking about real-time data systems. The fifth driver is the enactment of a student success mindset that employs an asset-based narrative for students and institutional belief and talent development. And I think I heard this a little bit in some of your comments earlier at the beginning about kind of maybe not everybody's bought into this, maybe some people question whether we really should be doing all this, although I am really heartened by the appreciation and at least the sentiments about how important it is to address equity issues. But this asset-based narrative needs to be something that is more understood on campuses across the board. I'm continue to be struck by how much I don't see this enacted among faculty and among staff who still believe that this is about weeding people out. I'm surprised, sometimes startled actually, by the strength of that perspective in higher education still. So this is the model. So focusing on 5 drivers to better articulate and represent what needs to change in the student success. If we're really going to improve student success, these are the 5 things we need to start thinking about in terms of advancing our know-how around. And the idea then is that, now this is going to blow your mind when you see this goes deeper. So then you start adding secondary drivers to this. And this is where all of the change strategies and the approaches to student success start to fit in. But the only way that something can get on that list of strategy is if it's connected to one of those drivers. So this requires us to better articulate what is it that we're doing and how does that contribute and what does that contribute to how we're going to get to this big goal of increased student success. So this is something that we've been trying to play around with to really get a better focus on these 5 drivers. And if we can start to fit in our change strategies, it will help overall build a more integrated, comprehensive approach to this really hairy student success problem we have in higher education. So this is my invitation to you. I would love to get your input, all the great minds that are in this room, about student success and retention. And I would love to send you what we've been playing around with and to get you to actually try and fit in all of the strategies and that you've adopted and that you are trying out at your own institution. So while the first part, the 5 drivers, are pretty solid. I don't think, I think we'll see some movement, some refinement of those, but those are pretty solid. We can get some input, but it's the change strategies where every institution is going to have their own strategies. So it's a very accommodating model in terms of what strategies you employ. But the drivers are pretty set once we kind of refine them and get to them to the place that is set. So I'd love to get your feedback on what's missing, what needs elaboration, kind of where you're struggling on some of this work. So I think we have a lot to do. We have a lot to address the shortcomings to mobilize higher education for student success. And here are my kind of final blistering conclusions. So we have a success narrative that too easily blames students. I'm really concerned about a success narrative that credits institutions for retention and graduation and blames students when they're not successful. I don't want to support that model anymore. The second is that conceptions of student success focus too narrowly on completion. I think we've really harped on that one. We haven't focused enough attention on quality. We have a deficiency of illustrations of equity-minded practices, so things that really close the gap. What's closing the gap? Let's get more of those illustrations out there. Actually, I will say that some groups like Excellencia for Education, the work that Estella Ben-Simon and her colleagues in the equity-minded work have really advanced a lot of this, so kudos to them for doing great work. And I think the other shortcoming that we have is piling on solutions instead of implementing problem-focused, integrated, improvement-oriented strategies. So these are some of the things that I'm thinking about that are on my mind that are worrying me. And I'll just close with what I think we need to keep thinking about. Is student success is about know what. We've got a lot of know what. We need to increase our capacity around the know-how, and then we really need to work on the can-do. So this is what I'm about, know what, know how, and can do. And I think we'll make some advances around this. So thank you for your attention on this. And I'd love to get some of your thoughts. And we have actually a full session after this. So I know I've only left 5 minutes for any sort of large group conversation. Anything that is on your mind right now, what are you thinking about all this? Are we on the right track? Are we way off? Does it represent anything that you need? Yes, my friend from the Seattle U.
So how do you think about independent universities, private universities participating, particularly in the systematic number 3, 4, and 5 we just saw, B16, B8 integration?
Fully. I mean, is there something that you think would be prohibitive or not conducive?
I'm thinking about systems, because we're in the Democratic HCU, for example, judgment systems, but it doesn't quite dovetail with state systems, state offers and those.
Yeah, I see where you're going. I think the spirit of it is to think more broadly. I mean, I actually think that in some ways, the Jesuit institutions have kind of much more systematic and support structures through their K-12 connections in particular. So in some ways you might be a model for doing it, even though I understand that it's much more mission specific in that way. But I think there are some ways that you're doing it, and particularly I'm going to end up giving you lots of credit here because I think there's some service commitments too that you guys enact that actually are exactly the kind of structural supports that we're talking about in this. So you might actually have an advantage, but you're right about the perhaps you're not going to have the connections around the state. But I don't think that takes us out of the need to work to identify what our state needs, what our student needs in order to be able to go out and work. So those kind of pressing larger societal issues are still part of that systematic support structure. Interesting idea, though. Yes, over. I'm going to keep looking that way. Is this our Chapel Hill? Hi.
One of the things that we're thinking a lot about is institutional responsibility and sort of the challenges that institutions face and thinking critically and reflexively about our policies, our practices, and our systems. And I think that colleges and universities have a real tough time with that, looking critically at ourselves and asking, what are we doing that is producing inequitable outcomes for our students? Are we complicit in redefining or reproducing inequities? So I'm always interested in that part of the know-how. How do we press our institutional leaders and as professionals in colleges and universities, how do we, in our individual roles, work against those things on an individual level or systemic level? I think that's a really critical part of the know-how.
Nice. Thank you so much for reinforcing that message and really laying out the challenge. I couldn't agree with you more. I particularly like the strength of your statement of what are we doing? How are we complicit in the inequities? I think that's a really important lens to shine, or a spotlight to shine on, and a lens to look through our practices. So thank you. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I love all these new ideas. I think they're great. But we have people who want to implement them and have an effect immediately without giving them time to simmer and process and actually work. How do you combat that kind of mentality? The newest idea gets embedded before the old idea gets a chance to work.
Oh, thank you for raising that really difficult issue. This idea of, I think it's a real problem, this sense of immediate gratification. We want to see some effect immediately, and I think it's either that or we're not even going to wait around long enough to see if there is an effect. I think we have both things going here. We implement something and then we're not even, we're on to the next thing. So I think one of the very specific suggestions I have on this is to develop more intermediate indicators. So, okay, let's think about some short-term indicators of how this program is working or the effect it is having along the way versus kind of waiting. My favorite outcome, it's nice to look at graduation rates and the effect on graduation rates, but come on, are you going to wait 4 years to find out if something makes a difference? No, we need more short-term indicators. That's a simple example, but I look at changes like the teaching practice changes. There are a lot of short-term indicators, very quick indicators that you can do to see if the intervention is making a difference. And we need to be more thoughtful about developing those and then sharing that to convince people that we need to stick with this. Or if the indicators suggest that things aren't working, how are we going to tweak this and still keep investing in this so that we can play it out to the end? So short-term indicators is one specific suggestion. Okay, I know what. One more? Okay, do we have one more? Maybe I should have looked at that before I asked if I could have more time. Well, I'll just say I am going to be here for another hour, so if you want to sit around and talk about these issues, I'll leave you with one last promotion. I previewed a couple of findings from our latest NSSE results. We'll issue our annual results report on November 17th. I invite you to look at it. It's totally free. Anybody can download it. Please have a look at it. CSRDE schools, I know you might want to look at it too, but I invite you to think about that. And I just want to thank you for your participation today and for thinking with us and all the work that you're doing on your own campus to increase student success. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks.